So we free range our chickens, okay? So they literally just cruise around in the yard. We have 15 of these types. We have ducks. We have 2 roosters. Then we have 4. We've got another 7 different types. Now, one thing that we learnt is that each rooster needs 6 chickens minimum. These 2 are brothers, and they haven't started fighting yet. And we also have another rooster. Now, roosters can fight. You should generally only have 1, but because we hand raised the chickens that we bought, they actually some of them ended up being roosters. So one learning curve that we got is that when you buy something that seems cute and you want to hand raise it, it's actually really hard to pick which ones are chickens and which ones are roosters. So that's one lesson we learned, that it's probably not the best idea to have them from really, really young unless you're wanting to eat them. Because if you wanted to eat them, then that's no problem, because if you have too many roosters you can eat it. But we don't want to eat Dusty or Oreo. If we did eat one, it'd be Oreo, but Dusty's probably more annoying, but we're not going to. So 6-to-1 ratio is a minimum. So obviously, because we accidentally have 3 roosters, we now had to get, and we only had 4 chickens, and then we got 3 from our neighbour, so we had 7. We actually had to go and buy. We went and bought at least another 12, but then they had 15, so I got all 15, and they're the same type. So that's an Australorp. These are kind of whitey Australorps, and that's another female Australorp. So all these kind of whitey speckled ones are Australorps, and that's an Australorp. So that means we're breeding the same type of chicken if we do have babies. Now, we have had 1 baby. Now you can see this is another lesson. So this baby is in quarantine with his mama. Now this cage needs to be moved because the grass is, we had to put the ducks in there. And this is another lesson, is we bought a cage, but because of a new cage to keep them locked up at night, but the shipping is delayed. So it's a bit of a tight fit at the moment because it was supposed to get here last week, but it's not. So we've had to make do. So what we've done is, you can see we've put the bricks around this cage. We've got the little baby and the mama, and she's already knocked her water over, so that's another lesson you have to learn. You have to come and check the chickens' water when it's something like this. One of the things you'll notice is a lot of the waters and feeders are actually not the best, so you got to find ones that work. But this chicken, the reason we've done this is because this little guy is susceptible to snakes and like birds, like predator birds, as well as foxes or dogs or anything like that. We haven't had any trouble with them, but snakes, our neighbours had a few little babies eaten by the snakes. So this mother laid 3 babies, and we actually lost 2, and that's a cycle of life. It's a tough thing, but he survived, or she. Hopefully it's a she. But we had to keep them in, because otherwise, if we let him just roam around like this, he'll last not even a day, and he'll be eaten by some type of hawk or eagle, or a snake will come. And the reason we put the bricks is because a snake will be able to get underneath that and get into that cage and eat that guy if we just left it. We also have ducks. Talk about ducks another time. They're a bit of a nightmare, but they're quite funny. So chickens as well, like old mowing containers, are pretty good. So these are good for roosting, for them to lay eggs. Now, understand they're probably not going to lay eggs like this, because this is out in the open and they'll want it to be a bit more protected and in shelter. So when we get our new cage next week, these will go in. We'll have them probably hanging off the ground. We'll probably put a rod through here and a rod underneath to hold the base, and then that will be good for them. Chickens also love perches. They don't generally like to sleep that much on the ground. They actually prefer to be elevated. That's what we've noticed. I put this owl here to hopefully tell other predator birds that there's already a predator bird here. So hopefully it stops any of these guys from getting swooped, because they are still pretty small. So anyways, so one thing as well, you have to move the chicken coops around quite a bit. So we are getting ones that are like, for example, like this one, it's like a tractor. You can move that around, and we, as I said, we just keep them there at night time to keep them protected. One of the roosters goes off in the trees and I have to go get him every night. And that we also have a little bit up here, this old shed where there's some rooster boxes and places where they can lay eggs. But it's safer to have them locked up, but you've got to remember, if you have them locked up in something like this, right, and a fox or snake can get underneath, they're trapped in the cage and they're dinner. So when we actually lock these guys up at night, they actually go into that little box there. That little box, this one's just a Bunnings one, but we had to secure underneath here, because underneath here actually you could push up. So you can see I've screwed that in so you couldn't push it up, but then also that makes it so it's harder to clean. So chicken coops in themselves, I wouldn't recommend one like this. It was cheap and it's doing its thing. But the one thing I would recommend with chickens, if you're wanting chickens and to have chickens, they're great for eggs, obviously, so good healthy food source. Real eggs, not cage-bought eggs. You can use eggs in a lot of different dishes as well as they're great for using as scraps. They're great for scratching up the surface, and their manure fertilizes the ground as well. You can see this area here where it looks a little bit dead. That's where we left a cage for too long, and that's obviously not good. But that was because of the ducks, which I'll get into. They're a bit of a nightmare. But the long-term plan is these chickens will graze, they'll eat worms, they'll eat grubs, they'll eat flies and things like bugs and things like that. They'll poo, they'll scratch up the ground a little bit, and they'll provide food source through eggs, and they'll eat our scraps. And so chickens, if you're in the burbs, just don't get a rooster, because they're noisy and they like to crow at ridiculous hours of the morning. And maybe just start with a few, but the recommendation I would get would be invest in a really good cage, one that's easy to clean and solid and safe from predators. So this one's probably safer from predators than this one, because it's heavy and it's harder for animals to dig underneath, but it's still not fully something like fox-proof. But the next one we are getting is fox-proof. So depending on where you are, cats, foxes, snakes, predator birds, you got to look at the weather temperature. We live in a pretty warm area. There's lots of things that you have to look at. So anyways, these are our chickens. So I thought I'd just let you know about them. Peace.